This video will show how you can use GitLab to automate the deployment of code to AWS EC2 instances. So here we are in the AWS console. We have two instances running. We have an instance in staging that's running an Express API, and we have an instance in production that's running an Express API. And these instances have elastic IPs associated with them, which means when this instance is rebooted, this IP will be stuck to this server forever, essentially. And so we have two EC2 instances, and and then on the GitLab side, I have these variables set up in the CI/CD settings area. So I have a key called prod deploy server, and this is the elastic IP of the prod server that you saw on the previous screen, and I have a variable called prod SSH private key, and this is the private key that was used to spin up the instance of this server. So when you spin up an EC2 instance, you have to specify a private key that's associated with that server. So we have the IP address and the RSA private key associated for the production servers, and we have the staging server IP and the staging server private key. So once that is set up, you can go into the GitLab YAML file. So this is what the GitLab YAML file looks like. It has to be at the root directory of your project, and it basically has two parts. There is a production job and a staging job, and this name can be any arbitrary name. It's just a name that's used by you to identify production. So I used production job, and in this production job we have certain attributes, and the most important attribute is this only master attribute property right here. So this is telling us that this production job only runs on changes in the master branch. And if we look at the staging job, we have this only. So this is saying the staging job only runs on changes in the staging branch. So we're using our branches to separate the environments, production and staging. So the master branch is production, and the staging branch is staging. And so we have this section here. Before the script is run, we generate an SSH key. And here is our bash script for production. Here's our bash script for staging. This is just some nice things to have here. This is the name of the environment, and this would be the staging URL, possibly to the front end of the application. And here's the production URL. So this is it. This is what the YAML file looks like in its entirety. And this is what the deploy bash script looks like for production. So if we had more servers, we would just loop through all of these servers and deploy all of this code. So we're running an Express API, and we're running it in the background using a library called Forever. And when this deployment script runs, the first thing we do is we stop all the Forever processes. We cd to the directory of where the code is located, and we pull from our master branch, and then we start Forever again. So this is just deployment. This isn't running any tests or anything special like that. This is just an example of how to deploy code automatically. And then for staging, it looks very similar, except we pull from the staging branch, and we deploy our code to our EC2 instance. So let's look at the API, the status of the API right now. So I'm just going to execute all of these. This is a program called Paw, and I just ran through all of these endpoints, and the health check works, the user endpoint works, the truck endpoint works, but the car endpoint hasn't been built yet. We want to build this endpoint and get it out to staging and production. And health works, user works, truck works, and car doesn't work. So the typical flow is to build these endpoints on your box, push them to staging, test them in staging, and then from staging you go to they get launched to production. So that's the flow that we're going to do right now. So here is the API in its entirety. It's an Express API. We have 3 routes, but we don't have our car endpoint. So let's do that now. Oops. So our car endpoint is done. And so let's add that. Add car endpoint. So we're pushing this to GitLab. So this is a dev branch in GitLab. And if we look at our pipelines, you'll see nothing is happening because nothing is set to trigger off of the dev branch. So nothing is happening, nothing is running. So we're pushing to dev and nothing is happening. So let's go and create a merge request, a new merge request, and we're going to select the dev branch and we're going to go into staging. Because that is we're going to say add car endpoint, and we're going to just review the changes, and you can see that this is what we added. We added that new endpoint. So let's submit the merge request, and we'll merge it. So if we go into our pipeline view, and if we refresh the screen, we should see something pending building. So what this is doing is there are runners, server runners, that are looking for jobs to do, and so right now a runner picked up that job. You can just see it changed. It went from pending to running. So a runner was free, and a runner is now running this job. It's executing everything in this staging job right here, because the staging job is associated with the staging branch. So it's doing everything in this block, and this block is also associated with this script. So if we look back there, it's still running. Passed. So if we can click on this, and we can see some of the details, some of the output of the job. We get all sorts of good stuff in there deploying on the server. That's our staging server. We see we stopped the forever process, and we started the forever process. Let's go back to that. So now if we go and we hit this car endpoint, we should get a 200. And if we hit this again in production, we should get a 404 because it hasn't been pushed to production. So once we're satisfied that everything is working right in staging, we can go to GitLab again and create a new merge request. This time we go from staging to master. I'm just going to do this, pushing from stage to master. And we see our changes, our new car endpoint, that's going into the master branch. Submit the merge request. It gets reviewed, it gets accepted, and there's this nice little thing here, nice little indication that says this is pending and it's running. You can see right there that a runner picked up the job and it's starting the deployment. It's kind of neat. And so you can see that view here. And we'll just wait for that to deploy. And I'm not gonna speed up the video or anything like that. This is real-time performance of GitLab. so we can look at the output of that. That's our production server. So if we go to our REST client and if we hit this car endpoint, we get 200.